Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is our weekend edition, an opportunity to look at a number of things in the news. Look ahead to next week, another Republican presidential debate coming up next week. But before we get to that, of course, we had the March for Life today in Washington, D.C., and there are certainly a lot of snow there. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. Lots of what we will talk about today will have to do with Donald Trump and Ted Cruz and the upcoming Iowa caucus, as well as the follow-up primaries. And then we might have time to talk about Hillary Clinton. One of the articles we posted is Hillary Clinton in big trouble, and also some of the emails that Hillary Clinton passed on are so secret even lawmakers cannot read them. And if we have time, which I doubt we will today, but if we do, might talk a little bit about the fact that when they went into the headquarters for El Chapo, they found one of those guns from Fast and Furious. So lots to talk about today. Kelly Shackelford with Liberty Institute. Thanks for being with us today.
Good to be here.
And Benedicta on her way to, I think, Israel, as she shared. And so we also have in studio with us today. So you want to watch in studio, not only do we have Kelly Shackelford, but we have our good friend, Representative Louie Gohmert. I'm glad you're here.
I'm always glad to be with you, Kerby. Always
well,
glad.
You had to get out because
Kelly.
of all the snow. They're going to have another one of these snowmageddons up there in Washington, D.C., and yet here these poor students, as well as all the way up to elderly people marching through the March for Life. And I'm not sure a lot of them are going to get out of Washington, D.C. now, because you got out just in time, didn't you?
Yeah, well.
For the snow.
You can't ever get out too quick. But, yeah, this has some really ardent followers. But I remember some time back there were some folks upset about using carbon-based energy, and they had the big placard, global warming, stop global warming. And I always mused because I think it was like in March, and they were going to march from the power plant to the Capitol. And they had their big placard, and the big picture was all the snow falling on them. They marched against global warming. And so anyway, this daggum global warming, I'm telling you, snow everywhere.
But again, you got to show dedication to this issue of the March for Life when you march through all of that,
and that's the point.
You?
These people were dedicated. They only had a few folks there for the other. This is dedicated people that understand how important this issue is. And just as Daniel Webster used to ask on the House floor, on the Senate floor, basically, how can God continue to bless us when, we're putting brothers and sisters in chains and bondage? You have to ask the question, how long will God continue to bless us when we're killing the most innocent, the most helpless among us, the unborn?
Yes. Well, we did talk about Sanctity of Life Sunday and some other things. Just before we go on to, obviously, we're going to talk about the campaign and all of the rest. I think you probably know Representative Sean Duffy. You know Sean Duffy from Wisconsin?
Yes,
he was actually on the floor of the House the other day, and he pointed out that on this issue of abortion, that African Americans make about 12% of the population, but they account for more than 30% of the abortions. So now the black leaders of the Congressional Black Caucus, instead of saying thank you for speaking out against black genocide, instead they want a formal condemnation of Sean Duffy on the House floor because he brought up some uncomfortable facts about the fact that African Americans are disproportionately being aborted. Any thoughts, Kelly?
Somebody wants to knock on their head and go, "Hello, is there anybody in there?" You would think if anything would speak to you, and if you're forming around an issue, or in this case a race, you'd think that discussion about the obliteration of your race would be something that you cared about instead of wanting to censor and silence. But that's sort of the old political correctness of the way things are going in the country. A lot of the reason of why people are responding to Ted Cruz and Donald Trump is common sense is just completely left. And people are going, what? Whether it's the Philadelphia mayor after the police officer shot, saying this had nothing to do with Islam, and over and over and over again, it's like I think Americans are just sitting there with their brow furrowed, going, what is he saying? What you're going to punish the guy because he pointed out that a disproportionate number of black babies are being lost. And instead, they should be giving him an award and say, thank you for bringing this up. This is something we've got to do something about.
Well, in fact, I was talking to Sean right before he walked down to deliver that speech, and we were talking about that before he went. And I was glad he was going to point that out. it is amazing how many people get upset when you're just speaking facts. Don't get upset with the one speaking facts. And in fact, I'm still amazed that the African Americans community, especially the Congressional Black Caucus, hasn't led the charge to stop anybody from being named the Margaret Sanger Award winner. For heaven's sake, she supported eugenics and, that felt that the chronically poor should not be allowed to reproduce, and was for abortion, and was for sterilizing people that were chronically poor. I mean, for heaven's sake, this is not a friend to the African American community. The things she stood for, and yet they go after Sean. That really is amazing, because it's a disaster what's happening to the African American culture with that much higher percentage being aborted. And then you look at places like Chicago. Of course, Black Lives Matter. Let's get upset about it. And the fact that most blacks are killed by other blacks. But there doesn't seem to be the outrage about the outrageous number of young black men that are being killed in places like Chicago, Washington, D.C., and others.
Both of you are lawyers, and you think of Oliver Wendell Holmes, and, 3 generations of imbeciles are enough, and he and Margaret Sanger and others believed in eugenics and all the rest. And I guess that brings us back sometimes to what we say here, Representative Louie Gohmert, that sometimes a scandal in Washington, D.C. is when somebody tells the truth.
Well, that's exactly right. That's what a scandal is in Washington. But you mentioned Oliver Wendell Holmes. Do you remember Herschel Hobbs? I mean, he just such a fantastic writer of Christian literature, such a great trainer and discipler. And I finally met him. I'd been reading his material for years and years. And when I met him, he was just barely hobbling along on a cane, barely getting. I said, "Wow, it's such an honor to meet you. I've been reading your materials for years." And I said, "Because your mind is you're such a gymnast mentally, I didn't expect to see you hobbling like this." He said, "Yeah, I'm reminded of what Oliver Wendell Holmes said when he was at 90. He was standing on a street corner in Washington, and a beautiful lady walked by, and he kind of shuffled on his cane to turn and watch her go by. And then he turned back to a friend and said, 'Oh, to be 70 again.'" So he said, "I have those days, but to be 70 again."
Yeah, well, again, talking about a Supreme Court justice, and when we come back, we're going to talk about who will be the next president to select what may be 3 Supreme Court justices. And Kelly has reminded us how that will change the 5-4 splits. And so it's very important to make sure you cast an intelligent vote about the next president. And we're going to spend some time talking about the campaign. We'll do that right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
The Bible rests upon a belief in absolute truth. Yet surveys by George Barna show that a minority of born-again adults and an even smaller proportion of born-again teenagers are certain of the existence of absolute moral truth. Even more disturbing is the fact that by a 3-to-1 margin, adults say truth is always relative to the person and their situation. Now, George Barna concludes in his book, Boiling Point, that moral anarchy has arrived and actually dominates our culture today. His argument hinges on a substantial amount of attitudinal and behavioral evidence, such as the rapid growth of the pornography industry, highway speeding as the norm, income tax cheating, computer hacking, increasing rates of cohabitation and adultery, and internet-based plagiarism. So when asked the basis on which they form their moral choices, nearly half of all adults cite their desire to do whatever will bring them the most pleasing or satisfying results. Although the Bible should be the basis of our moral decision-making, the surveys show that only 4 out of every 10 born-again Christian adults relies on the Bible or church teaching as their primary source of moral guidance. The survey also found that the younger generation was even more inclined to support behaviors that conflict with traditional Christian morals. So today, many Christians are not really thinking nor behaving as Christians, in part because, actually, they have rejected any belief in absolute truth. So if Christians believe that morality is relative and determined by the situation, then they have changed biblical moral principles. So today, there is a critical need for Christians to think and act biblically in every area of life. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Weekend edition, if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Kelly Shackelford and Representative Louie Gohmert in studio with us today, and we certainly will take your phone calls as we talk about the campaign. First of all, Donald Trump has been able to bring to his particular side some establishment figures, as well as Sarah Palin this last week, and was introduced in a very enthusiastic way by Jerry Falwell Jr. On the other hand, I've posted a piece here from National Review where the entire magazine essentially is a kind of a who's who of conservatives saying that Donald Trump is not a conservative. So you have that. Meanwhile, of course, you have Ted Cruz certainly dealing with some of the conversation that is taking place there as well. And I think we need to kind of get into some of those details. Kelly, first of all, I don't think I've ever seen a time where National Review or any others has devoted an entire issue to actually trying to dethrone a nominee of the favored party. That's pretty unusual.
Yeah, it is. But, you know, I've got to say, the National Review used to be the conservative icon, and really it's somewhat lost that. I mean, for instance, I think they endorsed Romney, not exactly the conservative icon. There are some really strong conservatives that signed on to that.
I would say so.
But there's also establishment conservatives in that.
Sure.
The bigger issue, I think, with it is I don't think they get it. You know, Trump is not a conservative. I don't know a lot of people that, well, I mean, some people might try to argue, but it's foolishness. He's not a conservative. He's never been a conservative. That's not why people are supporting him. And so that's not going to make any difference in getting people to not support him. The real issue, and this is an issue that I think has not been discussed, and I don't understand why. I was a little slow to see it myself. But the real issue, the reason those people are supporting Trump, same reason many of them are supporting Cruz, is to get rid of the establishment.
Right.
To get rid of the fixed game where nothing gets changed and we have no progress. Even when we have a landslide victory in the Republican Party in the 2014 election, it means nothing because the game's fixed and the establishment's running everything. The question I don't think people are asking is, and I think I'm going to give some clues on what you can start looking at, but is Donald Trump going to overthrow the establishment? There's a lot of assumption there, and I think people are not really paying close attention to the fact that Donald Trump has always been a part of the establishment. His words are great right now, right? But he's the art of the deal.
Yeah.
That's his book, and he's making a deal right now with the primary. But as soon as the primary's over, he'll be making a deal with a whole different group. And if you see the attacks on him that, hey, he was giving money to Nancy Pelosi. Hey, he was giving money to Hillary Clinton. Hey, he was, we can go on down the list. And the answer is, oh, as a businessman, that's just what you do. Yeah, that's what you do if you're a part of the establishment. You spread the money around to both sides. You play the game. He is as establishment as you will find. And I'm afraid that the people backing him are going to be in for an unbelievable surprise if they don't sort of get their eyes open. If you want to find somebody who does anything, who's conservative, who's anti-establishment, who's whatever, I've said this a lot on the air, Kerby. I've found that you can't trust what they say, even if they really mean it. The question is, if they've done it before they ever ran for office, and you see it in their life, that's how you'll know if they'll do it. You're not going to find that with Donald Trump. Yeah. You're going to find it with Ted Cruz, but you're not going to find that with Donald Trump. So I think they're asking the wrong question, and I think the National Review was focusing on the wrong issue. I think that's going to get them nowhere with their
We
with their
talked
goal.
about abortion just a minute ago in this piece in Weekly Standard, for example. Would Donald Trump be pro-abortion? You said before that the whole question is that somebody might say they're pro-life, but did they ever get involved in a pro-life campaign? Did they ever help a pregnancy resource center or those kinds of things? What about an individual that says, well, actually, I think there's nothing wrong with abortion. Matter of fact, I think my sister would be a good person to be on the Supreme Court, even though she's pro-abortion. You get a pretty good sense about what they've said and what they've done, or as you said, what they haven't done. So whether you're looking at the president or a member of Congress, if they say they're pro-life and they've never shown any pro-life inkling until they've run for office, you got to be skeptical, don't you?
Well, I mean, you should be. And people can get caught up in the moment and everything, but when they start to vote, the only way you're really going to know is by knowing who they were and what they were before they ran. And I'm telling look, in Donald Trump's book, he says he's for single payer, so he's for worse than Obamacare. But again, did the voters behind him care about that? No. What they care about is they know that somebody's got to blow up the establishment or we're all dead. And so they're just looking for somebody that'll do that. And what I think they're failing to analyze is who is the one that will actually do that with the establishment. And I think they're going to be in, and I'm really concerned about our country, because if this thing goes, and it's Trump, if Trump were to win Iowa, for instance, I think he would sweep the whole thing. And I think a lot of those people behind him will find themselves dramatically disillusioned, and I think our country might be in serious trouble at that point, because I think this is sort of a last gasp in a way. Let's get somebody over Trump. And you have somebody who comes out, says strong things, and the whole time he's part of the establishment. I think the betrayal and the feeling in people will be dramatic and will really impact our country in a bad way.
Representative Louie Gohmert, I think you know Sarah Palin. She endorsed Donald Trump, and that one was a puzzle to me. Was it to you?
Well, I think tremendously of Sarah Palin. I like her, and she said nice things about me, and I say nice things about her. And I know whatever her motive was for endorsing Trump, I know it's a good, noble motive. That's who she is. But and y'all know I had endorsed Ted Cruz back early last year. But I've had two conversations with Donald Trump. One was in New Hampshire back in 2013. I get asked for some reason to speak at a lot of these deals where the presidential candidates do. I guess I make them look better if they speak right after or right before me. But so I'm following Trump, and Trump comes off the platform, and they've already said, you're next, so move up behind the curtain. So when he comes through the little curtain, I mean, we're basically nose to nose, and he starts punching me in the chest, goes, Louie Gohmert, I love you. You're great. You're my kind of guy. You're a fighter. Did you get my contribution? I just got it. I said, yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you. You're my kind of guy. I said, well, great. Well, now, I mean, how do I not like a guy like that? I'm sorry. I mean, I'm going, wow, I really like that guy. And anyway, but he hasn't taken those positions that some of us consider to be the best for the country in the past. We've taken them. We've stayed with the same positions. There's been a huge metamorphosis in his opinions in a very short time. And if they're real, fantastic. But as an old history major, I think, you need to look at people's history to see. The one thing that all three of us have seen repeatedly make the world a difference is say, this is the date I accepted Christ,
yes,
and it changed my life forever. And every opinion I have is now guided through that relationship. You see that remarkable change. And, of course, as I understand, he had said previously that he didn't have a need to ask for forgiveness, so I don't think that kind of life-changing experience has occurred. But people want an iconoclast. They want somebody to destroy the establishment. But if, when he was asked about taxes, Kelly, he said, yeah, I'm good with, progressive tax. The more you make, the higher percentage. That's not going to get us back on track. And as Arthur Laffer, at Reagan's economic advisor, said, you raise taxes to go after the rich. The people you won't get will be the rich. Mm-hmm. They're the only ones that can move, can modify their behavior. They can do whatever they have to get around the tax. The people you hammer when you try to rig the tax system to hurt the rich, you're going to hammer the middle class every time. And he's still, when he's not talking about how unfair people are to him, they get him on an issue like taxes, and you go, whoa, wait a minute, I'm not for a progressive tax.
Yeah, what about Obamacare? What about, you go through a lot of the issues, but I really don't think the support that's behind Trump are those issues. And there's a number of articles I know which we'll talk about that have started to leak out that I think are incredibly revealing if Point of View listeners will look at those, because they really tell you something that people aren't paying attention to that I think will very soon become obvious after the primaries.
Got a couple articles. John Stemberger, for example, Matt Walsh, and a couple of others, which we'll mention after the break. But if you'd like to join us, I'm sure you have an opinion as well. 1-800-351-1212. Privileged to have in studio today Kelly Shackelford of Liberty Institute, Representative Louie Gohmert. We'll be back right after this.
When you're listening to or watching network news, do you ever start talking to the newsreader or anchor person? Come on, you can admit it, you do, don't you? You can't believe what you're hearing, and you feel the need to correct them. Sometimes you almost feel like you're living in a different world, and you are. People who deny God are living in a world of make-believe. The next time you're shaking your head at the news, I want you to do something. Pick up the phone or write a check or visit us online and give. Point of View brings you a biblically informed analysis of what's happening, but to do it, we need your partnership. Visit pointofview.net and click the link next to Donate Now where it says Become a Monthly Partner. Pointofview.net. Or mail your donation for this month to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. That's Box 30, Dallas 75221. Or call 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Don't just shake your head. Make a difference. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Weekend edition. If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Your thoughts about Donald Trump. We've already had a chance to hear from Kelly Shackelford and Representative Louie Gohmert. We'll continue on that. Also get into Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, and a few of the others. Don't forget that there is a Republican presidential debate next Thursday. And then, of course, in just a little over a week, we are talking about the first Iowa caucus, and then from there, a whole series of other very important votes. Of course, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, and then, of course, March 1st. The ball game might be over by then.
Well, can I ask y'all a question?
Go ask the question.
As Kelly knows from being a litigator, when you have experts in court, you can ask them hypotheticals. So I'd like to ask you guys a hypothetical. Say Donald Trump wins the Republican nomination. The odds look like that's a decent chance now. And say, hypothetically, he were to go back and say, okay, as Nixon says, you run to the right in the primary and you run to the left in the general election. Then in approaching the general election, being a winner, he's a winner.
Yeah.
He goes back
Softens
to the
a lot
left.
of his positions, yeah.
Doesn't just soften them. He goes back
Changes
to
them.
the
Okay.
positions that he's held his entire life up until the last year or so. Say he goes back to all those positions he's held for all his life until recently. What would Republicans do at that point? What do you do? He's the nominee. He's got it, and now he's taken all his old positions back. What would they do?
I think they would do similar to what they did the last two elections. I think that's, take the evangelical vote, 90 million. And the largest turnout was in I guess it was 14 was the largest turnout. And then it went down 4 years later with McCain, and then went down again with Romney.
So in 2008 was the big turnout.
Was that what it was?
Yeah, 2008 when Obama won, and then 2012 when Romney
No, it's before it was Bush.
It was 04. Yeah.
Yeah. It was
04.
04.
Okay.
That's what I meant.
Yeah,
and it said 14.
Yeah.
04. So that was the big one. And what happened was in both those cases, and this is actually I know the person that's gave this theory has been Ted Cruz has been running on this theory. Is that the reason it went down is because the establishment keeps saying you run to the left in the general election, and that's not what happens on the Democrat side. No. They don't run to the right. They know it's about really your base being excited and getting out and getting their friends out, and so the Republicans haven't. And so his whole point was we've got to stay true to what we are. We've got to make sure and get the base. So if you had that happen with Trump, and I think people look at elections with a static model. It's like a static economic model instead of dynamic. Mm-hmm. And they think that, okay, the people are fungible, and let's just move to the middle where we get the 51%. Well, what you do is you start losing all kinds of votes and energy.
You lose your base.
And you lose.
Yeah.
And so the Republicans haven't tried the let's stay with the base, in a pretty
Since
long
84.
time. Yeah. And
84 is the last time.
And so I think the same thing would happen.
Yes.
And it probably worse because
Could you
people
see a third party?
I don't know about a third party because I don't know who would lead it, and they would know it would be destruction anyway. But I just think people would just say a pox on all their houses.
I don't see a third party simply because the person that could lead it would be Ted Cruz, and I just don't think Ted Cruz would do it.
No, I don't think so.
So it kind of becomes an end point. But back to Kelly's point, in 2004, the only way George W. Bush was reelected is because even though he ran away from it in Ohio, the marriage issue was enough so that he won by 50.8% of the vote.
Well, now, Karl Rove, his campaign made sure that issue was on the ballot in the swing states.
Yeah, and that's what helped. Other than that,
well,
it
if
wouldn't
they
have
don't
helped.
get the marriage issue on those ballots in those critical states like Ohio, he does not get a second term.
There you go.
And then I didn't understand when he got into office, we all understood it was marriage, as Moses said God gave it to us, as Jesus repeated Moses and God, that was marriage. I'd never understood why he would not go ahead and embrace the thing that got him reelected.
Instead,
and then we found out in his book,
Yeah.
his book and Laura's book, that after he's elected, Laura said, in essence, you got too many friends, this will hurt. You can't go out there and take this position. And so he backed off of that. So people are ready for somebody that's going to actually do what they said they're going to do. But like you've been talking about, Kelly, you look at history to get an indication of future performance.
That's the only way. And again, I say this, because, when you've been around a while, and you do the kind of things that I do or Kerby does or whatever, people come to you for endorsements a lot of times.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of these people come up and I used to think it was just people who lied. They say they're pro-life, but they're really not. They say they're this, but they're really not. It's not. It's people who are really sincere. It's just they've never been in that position before. And I found that, so the only way to, how can I really know? Because you really can't really know if that's what you're operating off. And what I found is the only thing you can really know is not even if they've been in office and done it before. That's not the best indicator, because if they're in a conservative district, they could act conservative and not be conservative at all. Yeah. So really the way to tell is what is their life show before that? And I think that's what people have to look to. I think this Iowa thing, again, we're talking the Republican side. There's incredible stuff happening on the Democratic side, which I know we'll get to.
If not, we'll do it next week. We'll have some time.
It's just, I think that whole thing's about to blow up, personally.
Oh, boy. Yeah, Bernie Sanders is doing well, and Hillary Clinton is not.
I think she's in serious trouble on the legal side.
But we'll leave that alone.
Well, let me just say, I don't think she'll be indicted as long as she leaves President Obama alone. She knows if he gives the wink and nod to Loretta Lynch, then Hillary, there's
they're the
plenty
best buddies
there.
After the last debate. But
There's plenty of, but if she leaves them alone and doesn't give indications like Petraeus did that they might turn on, then she will go unindicted, I think. But if she turns on him even one line, I think they'll say, yep, go after her. She's indictable.
And I don't even know, if you're on the Republican side, I don't even know if you want her sort of knocked out of the Democratic contest or not, because, her likability factor, her untrustworthiness factor, I don't know that you could ever find a candidate with those kind of levels of those things. So I don't even know if you're on the Republican side what you would actually want to happen. You want to keep her in the race or you want her out?
Well, that's a great point. If you remember back 2008, there were a lot of Republicans that were on the Stop Hillary movement.
Right. And they got
crossed
Obama.
over and voted in the Democratic primary to stop Hillary, this inevitable Hillary Clinton election, and they got Obama.
I think that be careful what you wish for, right? On the Republican side, I really think Iowa is it's people say, oh, Iowa's important. No, I think Iowa's the whole ball game.
It may be.
I think the only person that, and everybody knows this, I think, that can beat Trump in Iowa is Ted Cruz. And I think if Ted Cruz wins there, then there's going to be a race. But I think if Trump wins there, I think it's over. And so I think everybody who's thinking about other candidates, well, I like this one a little better, your real decision, especially if you're in Iowa, is do you want Trump or Cruz? That's really your choice. And I think that's probably the choice for the whole country that will be determined by Iowa. And I think most people aren't focused on that, but they should be. The people in Iowa, like the Bob Vanderplats and the people that have been around a long time, they've been saying this for a few months. And I think they're right. And I think articles are coming out saying this now too. But I think I like so-and-so and he's at 1%. And I like so-and-so and he's at 7%. I would highly suggest if you're in Iowa, this is about, do you want Trump or do you want an alternative to Trump, and that alternative being Cruz, because that's kind of your choice that you've got.
Well, do you remember back when Clayton Williams was running for governor, and I think there were 8 people here in Texas that were running for governor on the Republican side, and some of them really good candidates, and Clayton won with like 70% or so. And I know the guy. He's an Aggie. He's a great guy. And I remember that night of the primary, people said, well, I don't know Ann Richards. I don't think there's anybody that can beat Clayton Williams. And I said, I know him. I love him. He's a great guy. He's a real philanthropist. But there is one person in the state of Texas that can beat Clayton Williams. It's not Ann Richards. It's Clayton Williams. But and he was able to do that. But, with Trump, he just said those things that any normal candidate would be knocked out of contention for saying. And yet he just keeps gaining momentum and gaining. I really think people are so desperate for somebody to turn around and be the new benevolent dictator that gets us back on track. But there was only one George Washington who had all the power and then gave it back. It isn't going to happen again. We can't do that.
We'll take a break, take some of your phone calls, 1-800-351-1212. We'll be right back.
A California teacher who has logged 28 years in the profession is waging a battle that could have a significant impact on public employee unions and First Amendment protections for teachers across the nation. The Supreme Court heard the case recently. The outcome could diminish the power of public sector unions. Rebecca Friedrichs is a third-grade teacher at Holder Elementary School in Buena Park, California. Early in her teaching career, she was a full dues-paying union member. But she didn't agree with the union's stance against a school choice initiative and declined to participate in the union's phone bank to defeat it. Eventually, she dropped her union membership, but she's still paying fees to the state's teachers union. Since the union negotiates contracts for teachers, it claims it should be compensated, so it collects what's called agency fees, claiming these fees are its fair share earned for its collective bargaining activities. The case is Friedrichs versus California Teachers Association. At its heart are these agency fees public employees pay unions, even though they are not union members. Rebecca Friedrichs and 9 other teachers are fighting the requirement in California law that they pay these fees to the California Teachers Association, an affiliate of the National Education Association. According to the Heritage Foundation, in nearly half of the states, public sector workers can opt out of paying full union dues and instead pay agency fees, which fund collective bargaining negotiations. A 1977 Supreme Court decision spares workers from being compelled to pay for a union's direct political activities. Rebecca Friedrichs and the other teachers say they should not have to pay even for collective bargaining because the positions taken in negotiations with school administrators reflect the political views of the union, positions they don't necessarily agree with. After all, unions are negotiating over the best use of tax dollars, and as Rebecca Friedrichs says, that's political. She adds, when you consider the fact that unions use their political dollars to put the officials in their positions, it becomes a troubling situation because the unions and the local officials are on the same side of the table. Here's a position the union takes which Rebecca Friedrichs opposes but still has to pay for. The California Teachers Union advocated for LIFO, a last-in, first-out policy which centers on seniority-based layoffs. She strongly disagrees with this policy, saying that hurts children. She says LIFO amounts to putting seniority rights ahead of merits. In California, she says, we just had a teacher of the year who was laid off because of last in, first out. That is just totally wrong. LIFO is political. Another of the plaintiffs, Sherry Joseph, objects to paying agency fees that go toward political causes that violate her religious beliefs. In oral arguments, a majority of the justices seem sympathetic. Hopefully, they'll decide to protect teachers' rights of free speech and free association. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We have in studio with us Kelly Shackelford and Representative Louie Gohmert. Let's head out to Georgia, WAGP. Larry, thank you for calling today.
Thank you, sir.
What would you like to say?
Well, there's a couple of things I wanted to say that, and it all relates to the fact that Donald Trump is supposed to be this businessman, and I wondered if you were hiring a president and you got Ted Cruz's resume and Donald Trump's resume, which one you would look at as being the one most suited for the job? Because didn't Ted or didn't Donald Trump say that Ted Cruz wasn't very good for the president because he wouldn't give in, he wouldn't bend, and he wouldn't compromise with the other people? And I thought that's exactly what we was wanting, was someone that wouldn't compromise our principles and our Constitution. That's what I thought we wanted.
Well, but keep in mind, though, people have seen the damage that a community organizer who has never led anything, any venture successfully that wasn't involved with somebody else's money. They've seen the destructiveness in the country. They've seen a man that should have brought great healing racially to the country become more divisive. And they know he had no business experience. Basically, everything he's ever gotten has been given to him, and had other people manipulate things for him. So they're ready for somebody who has been successful in business. And a lot of us have that feeling that he knows what it is to make a payroll and pay taxes as a business and that kind of thing. And they're ready for somebody that's been involved in business. I think that's one of the attractive aspects of Trump. But you also have to look at what a person's positions have been. So when you look at the resume and somebody's applying to be your public servant as president, you have to look and see what kind of servant have they been, and have they done the will of those working for them, or has he led with an iron fist? And, would he be responsive to those that elected him? I don't know. It's a big question.
I think Larry's point is a really good point. And I would encourage people, if they're not reading these articles, or at least think about this. And I mean, you had the Bob Dole thing happen in the last day or two, where Bob Dole comes out and said, look, I will absolutely not support Ted Cruz, but I can support Donald Trump because, quote, we can deal. And then you had, there's just so many of these establishment leaders that are now coming out and saying, Trent Lott. You had the consultant, Alex, forget what his last name is quoted in the Washington Post saying, look, Trump is a deal person. As Larry just said, he's pushing that if you can't compromise, you can't do a deal. And he said, so he's making a deal right now in the primary. And then I think his words were, watch him pivot after the primary, because he's going to be making a new deal. And so I think that's a good point. I mean, you kind of got to ask yourself, the things that Trump is doing right now, I'm listening to him say about Ted Cruz, I don't understand why he's saying it, because it kind of goes against his message. I mean, for instance, the recent one is nobody likes him, meaning nobody in the Senate likes him, because he opposed the entire establishment in the Senate, and which kind of is communicating, if you're Trump, well, they're all going to like me because I'm not going to make it difficult for them, and the good old boy game is going to continue. I mean, that's really what I mean. So you're like, you got to stay on one message or the other here. You need to be consistent. But I think there's something people love, and I do too. I love a number of the things that Donald Trump has done in this race. I think the establishment candidate, what he did to the establishment candidate, I don't know that anybody could have done. Jeb Bush, had, so much more money than everybody else, and all establishment money and support. And Trump just, put a brand around his neck that he couldn't shake off. And so I do appreciate a lot of things he's done, and I appreciate a number of things he said. But I think if you're looking at this and you're down to two candidates, if you're an anti-establishment person, I think you've really got to ask yourself questions about why the establishment is all now saying, now Donald Trump I can deal with, but not Ted Cruz, because I think that communicates a lot about the people who are really scared about their power being taken away and who they're most scared of.
Yeah, I'll always be grateful to Trump for knocking down the establishment candidates in the Republican primary. My heavens, it was ordained. The only question was, is it going to be Jeb or Marco as the establishment candidate? And wow, in comes Trump, and that all flies apart. And so we've got a real shot at having a real conservative this time. And so I'm grateful for that, but I still want a real conservative.
Amen.
Let's take another phone call. We'll go to Texas, KCTA. Joanne, thank you for joining us today.
Hi.
Hi, Joanne.
I had a comment about Donald Trump. He kind of bothers me. When I see him, there's just something about him that I think is deceptive. And he reminds me of Obama, really, because he's preaching change without using the word. And he's going to go in and change everything. He doesn't really give any strategies or plans, just says everything will be great. But he hasn't said what he's going to do except build a wall. And he was a Democrat until just not very long ago.
Well, Joanne, I think the key to this dilemma can be found in either 2 Corinthians or maybe 3 John. I think if you look at 3 John, that's going to have some real truth.
For those who, you got to explain this because not everybody understands what.
We haven't even gotten to Jerry Falwell Jr. yet. But again, instead of saying 2 Corinthians, he said 2 Corinthians.
And this is Trump.
Now, again, how many of us around the table have ever said, I've got a Bible question. I'd like to ask Donald Trump about that. So let's give him. He's not expected to be a Bible scholar, but at the same time, I think it illustrates some of the things that happen. And what about that effusive introduction from Jerry Falwell Jr.?
Shocking.
That was as good as, if not better, than what Sarah Palin said, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a little surprising. And I really think that this, if you watch the evangelical split out and what they're saying of where they're going, Ted Cruz has more than any other candidate, but Donald Trump is pretty close behind him, and then Rubio, I think, is next. And so I really do think it's a very interesting election in that I really do think that the born-again Christians are really the ones to decide this. So whatever's going to happen to the country is probably going to be in our lap.
It's such a great point. God has given us the opportunity. He said, look, you've got my rule book. You understand what my rules are. I'm the manufacturer. Read the manufacturer's manual here, and you understand. And I'm giving you this choice. And you're going to either select someone who believes in me and will lead you out of, the desert, or you're going to choose somebody that doesn't know me and talks a good game, but you're going to wander for a while longer.
I hope people think of standing in front of Christ and saying, this is who I want to lock in with.
Yeah.
Because we need, not that anybody's perfect, everybody's sinful.
But
we need to do the best we can to lock up with the person that's going to stand the most. At least the person.
Do you think it's important that somebody know that they've fallen short?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's what I was going to say. At least somebody who will start every day on his knees going, I'm not up to this job. I need your help. I mean, that's who we need to be
I couldn't
for.
help but think, I'm sure y'all read The Harbinger, that when Trump was saying, we rebuilt, I went, uh-oh, Isaiah 9:10. Oh, boy, here we go again.
Okay, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about what some of the Christian authors have said about Donald Trump, and we'll take your phone calls. All that coming up right after this.
Have you ever thought about taking a trip to the Holy Land? I know I have, but perhaps like me, you've always thought, there's no way I could ever afford it. And how would I get around, make sure I see everything? Well, maybe, just maybe, it's time to realize you can do it. Point of View has made the plans. 15 days, 10 in Israel, the possibility of 5 more on the journeys of Paul in Greece. And the cost, well, it's pretty surprising. You can check it out at pointofview.net. Click on the Journey to Jerusalem banner. Imagine yourself in Caesarea and Nazareth, where Jesus grew up, in Capernaum, on the Sea of Galilee. We don't suggest you get out and try walking, but, well, you could. The Dead Sea, Masada, the Temple Mount, the Garden Tomb, it's all included, and you'll be accompanied by Kerby Anderson. And I don't even have time to talk about Greece. Athens, Corinth, Berea, Thessalonica, Philippi. See the full schedule at pointofview.net. Come on, take that next step. Pointofview.net. Journey to Jerusalem. Pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour of Weekend Edition. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Kelly Shackelford and Representative Louie Gohmert in studio with us. First hour, we spent a little bit of time talking about March for Life. Most of the time has been about Donald Trump and Ted Cruz. And we mentioned a little bit about Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. We might get to that a little bit later. But before we take another phone call, one of the things that we sort of been alluding to, Kelly, are some of these articles that have appeared in, and if you're on Facebook, you've seen these. And if you're looking at various Twitter feeds, you will see them as well. One that we posted a week ago by John Stemberger, and here's an individual who's been on the program with us many times before, an outstanding attorney and conservative leader in Florida. 3 questions evangelicals should ask about Donald Trump, and one of them is, what is known about Trump's personal life and morality? And I have to admit, I'm pretty well schooled, but there are all sorts of things here I did not know that raised some questions about the moral issues. Then number 2, Kelly, as you point out, where did Donald Trump stand on moral and social issues of concern to Christians? And talking about some of the things he said about things like abortion and same-sex marriage and all those kinds of issues. And then number 3, are the love of money and pride legitimate issues to weigh when considering support for a presidential candidate? Well, that's been out for a little bit of time, but then the other one that's come out is by Matt Walsh, and Matt Walsh has been on the program with us as well, and he's a blogger, and he's pretty tough, you wouldn't want to be in a ring with him. But dear Christians, if you vote for a godless man, you're asking for tyranny. And this one goes on for page after page. Now, a lot of it is a critique of what we mentioned in the first hour, where Donald Trump was invited to Liberty University, all the things that were said by Jerry Falwell Jr., and then the things that were said by Donald Trump. And apart from the 2 Corinthians comment, there were some other issues there as well. So this is a question I'd like to get for the roundtable and then see where we are with the phone calls. What about the Christian vote? If indeed, as we ended the last segment, the Christian vote may be key, what about how do Christians think about whether or not they support Donald Trump or certainly some of the others? We can talk about Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio or some others. Certainly there are some real differences in terms of some of the moral issues.
Yeah, look, the only reason that Donald Trump, and I don't want to, I want to be very clear that, I hope Donald Trump realizes that he does need forgiveness, that we all need forgiveness. I mean, his comment, I know, in Iowa that he's never asked God for forgiveness because he's never known anything he really needs to be forgiven for, obviously shows that he needs to know the Savior, and I would love to see that happen. And the blessings that would come from
and
that.
Russell Moore and others have talked about that. Franklin Graham's talked about that.
Yeah.
So I would love to see that. Yeah. I like the guy.
Yeah,
I just really like
he would
the
be.
guy.
Think of what a guy he would be for the Lord. I mean, he's
my word, would he be the most powerful if he came to that point?
But I think that when you look at these things, I think Christians. The reason he is doing things like coming to value voters and holding a Bible in his hand, Donald Trump, and waving it around. It's really embarrassing if you're a Christian because you realize you're watching what he says and things like 2 Corinthians and things like that when he said at Liberty last week or this week, I guess it was. It's obvious he doesn't, what's your favorite verse? Well, that's too personal a question. He doesn't know a verse, and that's okay. I mean, what he's trying to do, and he's getting a significant percentage of people who refer to themselves as born-again Christians, evangelical Christians. But I think if you're voting on those issues, it's obvious that Donald Trump wouldn't be your choice, which is why I think that people are voting for a different issue. They're not. They're putting the morality issue aside. They're putting those issues aside, as important as they are to them, because again, the approach is, if we don't fix the system, everything's going down. So it doesn't matter what your issue is. And so I think that's why these kind of morality stances look at, and you could never, ever vote for somebody like this normally as a Christian. But I think that's the reason that has no effect, is because people aren't voting for that reason. They want to blow up the system. And that's why I'm saying I think people have to reanalyze that, is who is really going to do that? Who is really going to turn things around? Who's really willing to do all that's necessary to pull things up by the roots? Or who's going to be making deals, compromises, and kind of working the system the way it's always worked?
Well, I love the iconoclast that he enjoys being, and I would love to see that with the establishment, and I think most people would. But any listener of yours, Kerby, unless they're just brand new and turning on for the very first time, knows 2 Chronicles 7:14. And so, I think the bottom line, seriously, you look at 2 Chronicles 7:14. I mean, it's been, I would say, overused, except we haven't done it yet as a nation. Mm-hmm. My dear friend David Dykes had me preach at our church, Green Acres Baptist, in Tyler last summer around our nation's birthday, and the title of my sermon was "Humble or Crumble," because that's where we are. So if you really believe, as I bet the huge majority of the people listening right now believe, the key to saving our nation for another 100, 200 years is 2 Chronicles 7:14, then the key to your vote would have to be, which leader will help us as a nation to humble ourselves, will pray, will seek God's face, and help us turn from our wicked ways. Which person running for president will do that? And if you think that's Donald Trump, he will lead us in humbling ourselves before God and praying, seeking God's face, turning from wicked ways. Then I think that's great. And, maybe he'll lead us in that at the casino. But anyway, but seriously, I think that is the key. If you're a Christian and you believe 2 Chronicles 7:14 is a key to this country having another 100, 200 years, who's going to do those things?
Well, again, we have some callers that want to address that issue. I've got a full bank of phone calls. So since I'm coming to a break, let's take that break, and then we'll come back and give you a chance to join the conversation today. Let me just mention that we have quite a number of articles that you can find on the website, pointofview.net, the cultural phenomenon of Donald Trump, the piece that has come out from National Review, in which you have just kind of a who's who of conservatives saying that he's not a conservative. Then a piece that I did want to point your attention to, and that is one by David French, because the idea that maybe not all the Republicans are conservatives, well, that's obvious, but even what some of these individuals that are supporting Trump, they're not necessarily conservative either. They're like the old Reagan Democrats. Very well-written piece that I mentioned before, and Rush Limbaugh's been mentioned the last couple of days, so I put it back up there for you. And then we have some on the Clinton emails and a variety of other issues. But let's come back and take some of your phone calls, because some of you would like to talk about other candidates, and you can put them on the conversation table, and we'll talk about those as well. All that coming up right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, the Bible rests upon a belief in absolute truth. Yet surveys by George Barna show that a minority of born-again adults and an even smaller proportion of born-again teenagers are certain of the existence of absolute moral truth. Even more disturbing is the fact that by a 3-to-1 margin, adults say truth is always relative to the person and their situation. Now, George Barna concludes in his book, Boiling Point, that moral anarchy has arrived and actually dominates our culture today. His argument hinges on a substantial amount of attitudinal and behavioral evidence, such as the rapid growth of the pornography industry, highway speeding as the norm, income tax cheating, computer hacking, increasing rates of cohabitation and adultery, and internet-based plagiarism. So when asked the basis on which they form their moral choices, nearly half of all adults cite their desire to do whatever will bring them the most pleasing or satisfying results. Although the Bible should be the basis of our moral decision-making, the surveys show that only 4 out of every 10 born-again Christian adults relies on the Bible or church teaching as their primary source of moral guidance. The survey also found that the younger generation was even more inclined to support behaviors that conflict with traditional Christian morals. So today, many Christians are not really thinking nor behaving as Christians, in part because, actually, they have rejected any belief in absolute truth. So if Christians believe that morality is relative and determined by the situation, then they have changed biblical moral principles. So today there is a critical need for Christians to think and act biblically in every area of life. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Weekend edition, if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Kelly Shackelford's Representative Louie Gohmert. Let's go to Missouri now. KCMH. Karen, thank you for calling today.
Hi. I was really thrilled when I heard that Ben Carson was going to be running. I think he's a very thoughtful, steady, and intelligent man.
He sure is.
Have the charisma of Trump, and I just don't see him in the news anymore. Donald Trump was extraordinarily rude to him, time and time again, making comments about child molestation and that he's an enigma. And I just do not want Trump anywhere near that presidency. What is going on with Ben Carson? Why is he not in the news? Is he just not... are people too stupid to just pause and listen to what he's saying, or what's going on?
He caught, it really was leading in Iowa, and was doing really well. And then right at the time, it was because of I think the trigger point for his beginning of descending in his poll numbers were the international conflict that occurred and his somewhat inartful way of expressing it and dealing with it that showed that he didn't have a real grasp of international foreign policy. And he started to move down, and it just didn't stop. It kept going and going and going to now where I think his polling numbers are so low that I think people are saying that, in Iowa, I mean, they're saying he might not make the top 6. And so he's a great man. I haven't heard anybody say anything about his character, but that he is an incredibly good man. And my hope is if he doesn't succeed here, which it looks highly likely that he won't in the primary, that he'll be picked by whoever ends
Wouldn't
up being
you love
president.
to see him in the cabinet?
That's the
Surgeon
kind of
General, Department of Health and Human Services.
I'd rather him be something better than the Surgeon General, where he has some actual input, because he is a man of wisdom. Oh, gosh, yes. That's a great spot.
You know, Karen, I don't know if you ever get my commentaries, but my commentary yesterday was on the flat tax plan by Ben Carson, which I think has been very well received by the Wall Street Journal. About 2 weeks before, I talked about his plan to defeat ISIS. And frankly, if you go to his website, I think he's got some of the better, more detailed plans. And as Penn and I said, I think about a week or two ago, where was that back in, say, October? Because that would have helped, I think, because many people think he's got a very thoughtful plan. Now, I know both of you guys support Ted Cruz and you like his flat tax plan, but
like Karen said, he's a very thoughtful man. He's a very smart, very thoughtful.
Yeah, I like his tax plan a lot.
Yeah,
I think it would be excellent.
You could go to yesterday's viewpoints and you'll see, I think, one that has been very well received by a number of individuals, which is unfortunate because he deserves some oxygen, and I'm afraid that the oxygen's been taken up pretty much either by Ted Cruz and Donald Trump, or by the conflict between Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, and then Donald Trump, or those. And sometimes, matter of fact, the last debate, remember when they called on him relatively early? He said, "Well, I'm glad we didn't wait a whole hour for them to call on me." And I thought, because that debate before that, they went an entire hour before they asked him a question. So,
but going back to Donald Trump's comments about Ben Carson's religious beliefs, let's go back in history. Remember all those comments you've read about George Washington belittling what the Quakers believed and what so many of the. I guess I'm kidding. But anyway,
I can't remember that.
Yeah, maybe okay.
I thought I knew that part of history.
That was somebody else. Yeah, it wasn't Washington. He never criticized, but he did believe in prayer. He certainly did, as he led the nation down Wall Street to St. Paul's Chapel in 1789 after he said, "So help me God." And it was his idea to say that. It was his idea to put his left hand on a Bible. That was not required. He made his brief statement, and then he led the Congress down Wall Street to St. Paul's Chapel for the prayer session where they dedicated the country to God.
Well, and I think there's a difference, too, and I think we need to make it clear. When candidates are, speaking, arguing, whatever, criticizing one another, there's a difference between personal attacks, like, Karen was just describing. I mean, attacking a good man like, Ben Carson.
Those are completely.
Yeah, there's a difference between that and, for instance, let's say when you saw Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz in the debates disagreeing with one another over their votes, their policy.
That's fair.
They're both Christians, and I thought they both handled it well. I mean, it is appropriate to point out, and even vigorously, as they did, but they didn't call each other names. They didn't do the kind of things that we're talking about, and those are character things. When you see somebody do that, that is not somebody of character that you want to put a lot of trust in, because if they'll say that about them, they'll say it about you, and I mean, whatever you care about the next minute, you've pretty much lost control of anything you can count on.
And I believe in a strong debate, and I know, having been a deacon at Green Acres Baptist, and man, we got into some pretty rough discussions. In fact, people thought I was kidding when I said, people would say, "Were you ready for all the meanness and backstabbing?" And go, "Yeah, I was a deacon of a big church. Sure, I mean, I was ready." But
nothing worse than Southern Baptist politics. Right?
Oh my! Ask any preacher. But I quoted from a pastor of our church in Mount Pleasant that said it before I was ever born. But he used to say, talking about marriage, if two people agree on everything, one of them's unnecessary. And now I would bring that up in deacons meeting. Look, if everybody agrees on everything, we're all unnecessary but one. But since nobody has 100% lock on God's truth, we need to be arguing and debating, but you do it without assassinating character.
Right.
Yeah. Let's take another phone call. David in Georgia, what would you like to add to the conversation?
Yes, sir. How are you guys doing today? Hope you're doing well.
We are.
Yes, sir. I like everything you're saying, but I want Kelly and Mr. Louie Gohmert to know that I'm a Ted Cruz backer in Georgia for the very fact that I like his stance, his Christian belief, his character, morals, all that plays well for me because I'm a pastor myself.
Bless
and
you.
There's no way I could Yes, sir.
Well, God bless you for what you're doing.
Yes, sir. And we're working hard in Georgia. Yes, sir, Mr. Gohmert. We're pulling for Ted. There's a lot of Trump supporters here, but
sure.
What I look at is,
him.
When he said he didn't have to repent or, need forgiveness for sin, that's way out of the Bible. So therefore, I just have to stay in line with the Word. And you guys, I like Ted Cruz, and I hope and pray that's the man we get, to be honest with you. That's what I wanted to comment.
Glenn Beck was asking me once, he supports Ted, but he said, what do you say to people when they say, how do we really know Ted is going to stay faithful to the things that he says? Well, for one thing, he said them and believed them his whole life. But I also respond by asking, do you know his father? Have you ever met Raphael?
And we've had him on just a couple days ago.
Raphael would kill him if Ted were to turn from the things he's taught him, turn from the things that he knows is right. And I go back to Raphael. I mean, it is pretty compelling when his father says, look, when I lost my freedom in Cuba, I could come to the United States, but if I lose my freedom here, there's nowhere else to go. And I had some guys in Washington visiting from Australia, some leaders there, and I was saying, some people have told me, Louie, well, if we lose our freedom here, we just all pack up and go to Australia. And they looked ashen-faced and they said, if anything happens to the United States, China will take us over in a heartbeat. That we will not be a place you could come.
And then that's a place they confiscated guns, if I'm not mistaken.
So there's no way to defend themselves. Once they come, they're taking over.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Well, the caller, the one thing that I'm encouraged by, and I think it'll be very interesting. Again, I think, and this scares me a little bit, but I feel like this election has been set up on the Republican side, especially, and if you look at what's happened on the Democratic side, I feel like it's been set up for born-again Christians that are going to make the decision, good or bad.
They will.
And that means we're about to either judge ourselves or we're going to get a respite. And so I think that's the decision. And I'm hearing, like, again, there's 90 million evangelicals. And the last election, it was so low that 56 million of the 90 million did not vote. And so you just change a small percentage of that. And so a number of churches are actually taking their list and they're going to say, look, you're not registered. I mean, you can run your list. There are groups that will do that for you. They're national ministry groups.
Gary Fraser on, and we have that link so people can do that.
And you're going to find that half the people aren't registered, and a number of those aren't voting. And boy, a lot of pastors feel real strong about this, that, look, we're not going to tell you who to vote for, but this is your job is to represent Christ. And he gave you the ability to pick a godly or an ungodly leader. And it's not a choice as to whether you exercise that stewardship responsibility. We need to do that together in the body of Christ. So I'm hoping a lot of pastors do that.
We have a link to Pray, Organize, and Vote, and Gary Fraser's on, where you can actually find out how many people actually are registered to vote in your church. We'll be right back.
When you're listening to or watching network news, do you ever start talking to the newsreader or anchor person? Come on, you can admit it, you do, don't you? You can't believe what you're hearing, and you feel the need to correct them. Sometimes you almost feel like you're living in a different world, and you are. People who deny God are living in a world of make-believe. The next time you're shaking your head at the news, I want you to do something. Pick up the phone, or write a check, or visit us online and give. Point of View brings you a biblically informed analysis of what's happening, but to do it, we need your partnership. Visit pointofview.net and click the link next to Donate Now, where it says Become a Monthly Partner. Pointofview.net. Or mail your donation for this month to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. That's Box 30, Dallas 75221, or call 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Don't just shake your head. Make a difference. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212, Weekend Edition. Kelly Shackelford, Representative Louie Gohmert. And just as we were coming to the break, Kelly mentioned something in passing. It is possible for you to actually figure out how many people in your church are registered to vote. We've had Gary Frazier on this program and others, Churches Impacting Culture, and you can see some of that material. And that would be really eye-opening and surprising. One of the pieces we've also put on our website today is you go to the website, pointofview.net, look under the picture of Kelly Shackelford. We have a piece that we have posted, and I've just called it What Pastors Can and Cannot Do. And what it is, it's a piece on 2 things pastors can't do during election season and everything that they can. Now, we've talked about this before because Kelly in the past has given us kind of a 1-page sheet, but this one's nicely written out. There's a 4-minute video with Kelly, which I'm going to give everybody an assignment. I want you to watch the video. Then, of course, this will take you to Liberty Institute. You should donate to them as well. But I would encourage you to hit that share button. It's like a little arrow. Put it on your Facebook page or send it to your pastor. Put it on a blog or something like that. Because Kelly, as well as I do, during this election season, there are a lot of pastors saying, well, I don't think we can register people to vote in our church. I'm not sure we can hand out these voter guides, and really there's only 2 things, as you say, pastors cannot do. And we have a lot more freedom than most pastors realize they have.
Right. And the 2 things they can't do, this is just if you're a 501c3 organization. The 2 things that the 501c3 organization cannot do are things that I've never known a church that wants to do these things, which is number 1, that the church entity endorse one candidate over another. Now, as a pastor, you can endorse whoever you want. You can be the head of the finance committee for somebody if you want to. But, again, I haven't had a lot of people call and say, hey, I'm, pastor at First Baptist Church of whatever, and we just wondered if we could, as a church, endorse a political candidate. I've never known anybody that want to do that.
Not happening.
Then the other one is even more rare than that, which is you can't give church resources to one candidate over another. And I just haven't seen this stampede of people saying, hey, we want to open our church coffers and give it to political candidates. So now you can also do that like by giving your mailing list to one candidate and not the other as a church entity. But basically, those are the 2 things. That's it.
But pastors can speak to moral issues and political issues, and they can educate their congregation. They can invite candidates, can't they?
Absolutely. They can invite the candidates. I'll just invite all the candidates to a race. If only one shows up, you've done your duty. If 2 shows up and you want to have Q&A from the audience, I mean, the candidate with the wrong views probably is going to regret that they showed up. I don't know. But the point is, that's fine. As long as you invite all the candidates, you've done what you're supposed to do. So there's so many things that churches can do. And the pastor's job, and this is why I really stress this, is to equip the saints to represent Christ in every area of society, including in the voting booth. So really, it's the job of the pastor to help their congregation, make sure they're registered to vote, make sure they have whatever's out there that's a nonpartisan so that they can know, because they might know about president, but down ballot, they might not know anything about the state representative or you name the local races. So to empower their people to represent Christ is exactly what's supposed to be happening in our churches.
Well, again, it's on our website, pointofview.net. You can go to Liberty Institute either way, but we certainly wanted to get your information out, and because you've put it in video form, sadly some people won't read a 1-pager, but they'll sit there and watch a video for 4 minutes. So either way, we got it written, it's video, it's all by Liberty Institute. You can of course go to their website. We have it on ours as well, and we'll put it under our Pray, Organize, Vote section, so it's a resource for you. Any comments, Louie?
When it comes to churches and Christians involved in politics, I just went to we used to call it retreat. Now it's a conference, because when we used the name retreat, it reminded people what we were really doing that they didn't want us to do. But we had 3 different speakers and they were wonderful, and they talked about how we need to have them. They'd speak to businesses about loving each other and having a trusting environment and stuff. And obviously the message, trust your leaders, trust those around you and all and whatnot. But our constituents sent us up there not to love and trust, but, you can agree but verify, that kind of thing. But the name of Jesus was evoked more than once, and the name of Reagan and his 11th commandment. But people have forgotten that Ronald Reagan in 1976 infuriated the establishment by standing up and saying Gerald Ford's a really nice guy, but he does not need to be the leader. We need a bold new leader. And establishment was furious at him. Well, people are now saying, Reagan would never stand against another Republican like that. Well, he did. He did. That's who he was. And then the other thing, when we talk about as Christians, what would Jesus do? You have to understand there were times when Jesus, he embodied love. He was truth, the way, the life. But even being truth, at times he stood up and said, you hypocrites, you den of vipers. Sometimes you have to stand up. You're not assassinating character. You're just telling it like it is and calling to attention. Maybe it's time that we got right with God and we're more honest.
Yeah. Let's take some more phone calls. And this one gets into some of the specificity that people are looking for. In New Mexico, KPGW, Frank, thank you for calling today.
Hey, Frank.
Boy, we're having a little trouble getting hold of Frank. Let me just ask Frank's question. I'm sorry because the cell phone isn't working very well, but the plan that Donald Trump has to deal with the national debt and insurance, there are a lot of people that are looking for some specificity. And I mentioned just a minute ago when we mentioned Ben Carson, he's put a lot of those plans on his website. I've looked at Ted Cruz and seen quite a bit of specificity there. When it comes to Donald Trump, I'm having trouble finding some of that. Am I missing something? Maybe I went to the wrong page.
No, I haven't seen it, but I've spoken after him a couple of places, and most of the time is spent talking about how unfair the media was, or how unfair some other candidate is, or what the other candidate's doing. But and I know some people who complain Republicans don't have an alternative plan. We got some great plans. In fact, I described mine back in 2009 to Newt Gingrich. He said, Louie, you got to get that bill form, get it scored. That'll change the whole debate. Well, I got it in bill form that summer, and CBO would never, ever score. The Democrats were in charge. But basically, it was something that Ben Carson said that I'd been saying for years, and that is, best thing we can do for a kid when they're born, give them a birth certificate and a home health savings account. And if we encourage pre-tax putting money in health savings accounts, then most people, unless you're chronically ill, and there are very few of those, you'll have such a massive amount accrued by the time you're 65. You not only won't want government help, you will not need it. But let people put money into their own health savings account. And in fact, I did a look in this, and this was part of the bill. You could give seniors a choice, and eventually they would be so thrilled with what they had. That is, give them a government paid for high deductible policy, and give them the amount of the deductible. If it's $5,000, $7,500, $10,000, give them that amount in their own account. They control it with their own debit card. It's coded where it will only buy healthcare things. And that would be cheaper in the end than Medicare. And for once in decades, the seniors would finally have control of their own healthcare again. It would be their relation with the doctor, not the insurance company, not the government. And I proposed this to ARP. They sent out a couple of people and said, wouldn't that be awesome? No senior would ever need another wraparound or supplemental coverage. I didn't know they were making hundreds of millions of dollars off those off the backs of our seniors. So they didn't want to see that go away. Yep. But there are a number of good plans. We got some great doctors. Mike Burgess has a great plan. Tom Price has a plan. There's a number of good plans, and Paul Ryans has some of my aspects in his plan. So we just need to go ahead and have the debate and get a plan out there that everybody can see we could get through if we could have something different than Obamacare.
On the other side, if Bernie Sanders becomes the nominee and then eventually the president, he wants to just have Medicare for everybody, right? That's what he's talking about. Well, or if Hillary is the nominee and becomes the president, she wants Hillary Care, which is just one step further down the road towards socialized medicine.
Well, they'll call it whatever they want, but the bottom line is everybody gets VA health care.
Right.
That's the
what you end
bottom
up
line.
with.
And some of our really smart Republicans have said, the thing is, Louie, we really don't have to fight Obamacare because it will fall of its own volition. No, socialism always falls of its volition, of its own weight. Socialized medicine never falls on its own. It has to be fought and removed so people can have good health care, because when it starts running out of money, which it always does, you put people in longer lines. They don't get the treatment. They say, whoops, you're 70, you're 75. You don't get a pacemaker. You don't get this and that. So people start dying earlier, not as good a quality of life. They don't get the hip. They don't get the knee. Those are the kind of things that happen. I'm glad Frank brought that up because we need to change.
Single-payer plan seems like that's what Bernie Sanders wants, what Hillary Clinton wants, and it sounds like from what Kelly says, that's what Donald Trump wants.
So he has said before that he's basically, it describes single-payer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's take a break, and we'll take some more phone calls right after this.
A California teacher who has logged 28 years in the profession is waging a battle that could have a significant impact on public employee unions and First Amendment protections for teachers across the nation. The Supreme Court heard the case recently. The outcome could diminish the power of public sector unions. Rebecca Friedrichs is a third-grade teacher at Holder Elementary School in Buena Park, California. Early in her teaching career, she was a full dues-paying union member, but she didn't agree with the union's stance against a school choice initiative and declined to participate in the union's phone bank to defeat it. Eventually, she dropped her union membership, but she's still paying fees to the state's teachers union. Since the union negotiates contracts for teachers, it claims it should be compensated, so it collects what's called agency fees, claiming these fees are its fair share earned for its collective bargaining activities. The case is Friedrichs versus California Teachers Association. At its heart are these agency fees public employees pay unions, even though they are not union members. Rebecca Friedrichs and 9 other teachers are fighting the requirement in California law that they pay these fees to the California Teachers Association, an affiliate of the National Education Association. According to the Heritage Foundation, in nearly half of the states, public sector workers can opt out of paying full union dues and instead pay agency fees, which fund collective bargaining negotiations. A 1977 Supreme Court decision spares workers from being compelled to pay for a union's direct political activities. Rebecca Friedrichs and the other teachers say they should not have to pay even for collective bargaining because the positions taken in negotiations with school administrators reflect the political views of the union, positions they don't necessarily agree with. After all, unions are negotiating over the best use of tax dollars, and as Rebecca Friedrichs says, that's political. She adds, when you consider the fact that unions use their political dollars to put the officials in their positions, it becomes a troubling situation because the unions and the local officials are on the same side of the table. Here's a position the union takes which Rebecca Friedrichs opposes, but still has to pay for. The California Teachers Union advocated for LIFO, a last-in, first-out policy which centers on seniority-based layoffs. She strongly disagrees with this policy, saying that hurts children. She says LIFO amounts to putting seniority rights ahead of merits. In California, she says, we just had a teacher of the year who was laid off because of last in, first out. That is just totally wrong. LIFO is political. Another of the plaintiffs, Sherry Joseph, objects to paying agency fees that go toward political causes that violate her religious beliefs. In oral arguments, a majority of the justices seem sympathetic. Hopefully, they'll decide to protect teachers' rights of free speech and free association. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Let's head out to California, KYCC. Daniel, you have the floor, and we have in studio with us Kelly Shackelford and Representative Louie Gohmert.
Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hey,
Hello.
Hey, I just want to see, put out a question for you first, and then maybe you can answer it after. But if you could explain to me about the Iowa, how we're going to get my vote would be for Cruz before it. I got the understanding that we get our election coming up at the end of the year, but I think we get to cast our vote towards who we want. And if you could explain that after, I just don't have that clear in my head. I was calling for another reason, though, and it has to do with Trump. I hadn't heard that he didn't need forgiveness. It's what I've heard talked about today. Yeah. It's kind of sad, because Jesus said, if you've broken one of the least of these commandments, you've broken them all. Mm-hmm. So we all stand guilty before Him.
All sin falls short of glory. Yep.
Yeah, the glory of God. And then the reason why I was calling, a couple of weeks ago, it's been that Trump had stated, very emphatically, "I do not lie." Well, the Bible says that we've all lied, and let God be true and everybody a liar. So he's.
His definition of a lot of moral issues is something. First of all, I feel sorry for you because here we are. You're in California. I used to live in California. You don't get to vote till June 7th. I got a feeling, Kelly, that's all over by June 7th. So that makes it kind of tough, doesn't it? Yeah.
So I got to move then, right?
There's some states you could probably move the day before and vote,
Yeah, well, I just assume California stay where it is myself.
For just a minute, he's sort of asking a broader question. Let me ask a specific one about Iowa. We're talking about a caucus here. So Kelly, explain that, because that is where the ground game, which we talk about, let's explain that for just a minute, is important, because you go to a location and everybody has a chance to give a speech for whatever. And so you're going to hear a speech for Donald Trump and for Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. You're going to go all the way down to Chris Christie and Ben Carson and John Kasich. It's going to go on and on and on and on. And then you start dividing up at that point. So that's where people that are really the grassroots are going to be important.
Yep.
And last time, 57% of those individuals that participated in the Republican caucus were what? Evangelicals. That's why the evangelical vote so much. What have I missed?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I think people need to understand, because most people think of voting in terms of going in, doing your vote and leaving. And, depending upon how long the line is, it might be 5 minutes. It could be 30 minutes, but the caucus is a totally different situation. You're making a commitment to go and stay there for hours and to hear a lot of speeches and to be a part of a process that's much more, you have to feel much more confident and much more willing to get out there and do that. And so that's why it's not the normal, hey, I'll just go and vote and whatever I feel like that day, I'll just vote that way, which is sometimes the way a lot of those people are casting their votes.
I'll vote on the way to work.
Yeah.
No, that is your day's work.
So it's different, and so you tend to get the people who are really committed, the people who have studied more, they really care about it, and so you get that's why I think they have such a hard time with the polling, because they do these polls, and they seem to always kind of miss it in Iowa, because it's a very different way to vote. I mean, I kind of like that way. I wish they would do that in more states, because we wouldn't have a bunch of very uninformed, kind of non-caring people who say, well, I'll go vote, even though I don't know anything about what I'm voting for. I think this does give you a lot of people who really care, who studied it more, and get you a lot more thoughtfulness in who's chosen.
So again, that's kind of how it's developing. But again, it's absolutely crucial, Louie, for you to know about these candidates, and somebody that's going to stand up and even give a 2-minute speech for why they support Chris Christie, for example. They have to know something, and that's important.
Because you can't go by a 2-minute speech. And that's what the founders anticipated, that if we were going to have true representative government where people were actually public servants, then you can't just go listen to a 1-minute speech when you are literally hiring your servant in your government. You're running the government, you got to hire a servant to represent you. You need to read their biography. You need to read their resume. Anything that other people are saying, people you trust, you need to then talk to them, and not just a 1-minute soundbite. You need to know before you hire them to send to Washington to do what you send them to do. You wouldn't hire people for your business unless you knew more about them. But people have entrusted their government with people they didn't know enough about. They just felt good after they met them.
Yeah, like Chris Christie, somebody gets a speech. Well, if you don't happen to know, which I know Marco Rubio has been bringing out a lot recently, because the establishment's kind of fighting each other over the establishment spot. If you didn't know that Chris Christie actually, supported the appointment of Justice Sotomayor, that would be a pretty significant thing not to know about, right?
Huge.
I mean, what, and this is one of the things I challenge the point of view listeners. Think about the different candidates and who you think they would appoint to the Supreme Court.
That is so cool.
Well, when I was in Iowa back, it's huge.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because you brought it up earlier.
So many of these are 5-4 decisions, you've said, right?
Yeah. Huge.
Second Amendment, First Amendment, a lot of these are 5-4 decisions, aren't they?
We haven't had a majority court either direction in many, many decades. We've always had this middle tier, this Justice O'Connor and Justice Kennedy. And right now we've got essentially, except for the Obamacare case,
John Roberts.
Roberts.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know what happens to him.
Okay, that's an outlier.
Yeah, besides that, you've got 4 liberals, 4 conservatives, and 1 who goes all over the place.
And just an example of how close this country comes to totally changing directions, and how important it is to have somebody that picks good people, not just pretty good. You go back to George H.W. Bush, and I understood it came down to David Souter and Edith Jones. Edith Jones is stout as can be, staunch conservative, brilliant. From here, she's been on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. And I was telling a dear friend of mine who's a dear friend of Edith's, I said, I think about the difference it would have made if Edith had been the appointment instead of David. And she said, you don't know how close it actually was. Bush couldn't make up his mind. He had them both come to the White House. And according to her, they were both sitting there. Bush couldn't make up his mind. And that's when John Sununu basically said, look, I'm sure she's great. I know David Souter. I don't know her. He won't do you wrong. And so they say, okay, and then they had the thing set up. They're ready to walk out to the Rose Garden and announce the next justice. And it was that close to being Edith Jones instead of David Souter.
And this is, again, I mean,
if you're not weighed heavily on principle, you're going to be swayed easily, something like that.
This is one of those things that those who are supporting Trump, I don't think anybody has any earthly idea who he would appoint to the Supreme Court. I don't think he does. I so wish that there was that even if it's a political move, if Trump would say, you know what, I'm going to get the head of the Federal Society to be my guy, and I'm going to say right now they're going to help me with the appointment to the Supreme Court. That would be a dramatic move in the right direction.
Or be the appointment.
Yeah, I think right now it's probably going to be a buddy from New York or, and this is, I think this is the most important thing that's probably going to happen from the next president. We're probably going to set the court one direction or the other, maybe for the next 20, 30, years, which every issue, Second Amendment, First Amendment, religious freedom. I mean, we can go down a list of all
Kelly,
kinds of rights.
He's not going to pick somebody that is against taking land, using government powers to take land from private landowners and giving it to a developer.
Yes. We have a lot more to talk about, but we have run out of time. And in a couple of weeks, the guest host is going to be Louie Gohmert. So it'll be fun to have you sit on this side
You're
when I'm
so
out
brave,
of country.
Kerby.
But again, I apologize for those you didn't get through. We will give you the opportunity on Monday. Have a great weekend. I want to thank Andrew and Catherine for their help behind the scenes. We'll see you back on Monday.
Have you ever thought about taking a trip to the Holy Land? I know I have, but perhaps like me, you've always thought, there's no way I could ever afford it. And how would I get around, make sure I see everything? Well, maybe, just maybe, it's time to realize you can do it. Point of View has made the plans. 15 days, 10 in Israel, the possibility of 5 more on the journeys of Paul in Greece. And the cost? Well, it's pretty surprising. You can check it out at pointofview.net. Click on the Journey to Jerusalem banner. Imagine yourself in Caesarea and Nazareth, where Jesus grew up, in Capernaum, on the Sea of Galilee. We don't suggest you get out and try walking, but, well, you could. The Dead Sea, Masada, the Temple Mount, the Garden Tomb, it's all included, and you'll be accompanied by Kerby Anderson. And I don't even have time to talk about Greece. Athens, Corinth, Berea, Thessalonica, Philippi. See the full schedule at pointofview.net. Come on, take that next step. Pointofview.net. Journey to Jerusalem. Pointofview.net. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.